This video is brought to you by Envato. Have you ever wanted to take an AI generated video and turn it into a fully cinematic 3D environment? Something you can use for a short film, a game cutscene, or even world building concepts? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to take any AI video and transform it into a full 3D scene inside of Blender. And with just a handful of 3D models and stock footage from Envato, we can turn completely flat AI footage into something that looks handcrafted and production ready. So, ready to realize your dream of becoming a 3D creator? Let's go! This video is brought to you by Envato. Access AI tools and unlimited downloads of millions of creative assets. And they've got the broadest range of categories, all in one place. Follow the link in the description and start creating now. So let's start at the very beginning, generating our base clip in Envato VideoGen. This is where we'll define the entire vibe of the scene. To do this, simply head on over to Envato, and then under Gen AI, just go to VideoGen. When you're creating footage with the intention of bringing it to Blender, your mindset is a little different from just creating a cool standalone video. You're not only describing what you want to see, you're describing what will work well as a background plate in a 3D environment. So let's talk through the key things you want to include in your prompt. Each part of this formula controls something essential for building a convincing 3D environment around your AI clip. First is the setting. For background plates, you want a wide, simple environment, something that gives you a clean horizon line and plenty of space to add your own 3D foreground. Next is the focal landmark. This is the big, stable object your viewer's eye will naturally lock into, and it becomes the anchor for your final camera reveal. Then we add a bit of atmosphere, subtle movement that keeps the AI clip alive without overwhelming the scene. Now, lighting is quite important for 3D integration. With clear light direction, you can match it in Blender and your 3D objects will blend right in. And finally, camera behavior. For a background plate like this, we want to keep things simple and let the Blender camera do all the work. This will give us a lot more options and freedom for other camera angles if we want to use them as well. So here's the full prompt I used for this project using the formula. Feel free to copy this directly if you want to follow along, or tweak it to fit your own idea. So pro tip, before generating the full animation, always run a start frame preview. It's way quicker to tweak a single frame than re-render an entire video, and it lets you make sure that the style and lighting are exactly what you want. Next, let's grab the assets we'll use to bring this world to life. On the Envato website, let's go to 3D, select models, and then use the search bar to find the assets that you want. I wanted this scene to feel like a dusty desert wasteland straight out of the Fallout games or a sci-fi film. So I picked out a set of assets that really support that theme. So things like a damaged car frame, radioactive barrels, broken street signs, a dead tree trunk, boulders, and some shrubs to help enhance the mood. After that, we'll grab a few supporting video overlays to help enhance the atmosphere and sell the scene even more. For this scene, we used things like a bird flock stock video and a dust storm overlay. And of course, we don't have to use these exact props. Whatever you're imagining, just replace these assets with the ones that match your world. Once you've done that, it's time to bring everything into Blender, starting with the AI video. Okay, so let's hop into Blender and start turning our AI clip into a real environment. Press Shift A on the keyboard, go to Image, and then select Mesh Plane. Select your AI video and then import it. Now from here, what we're going to do is we're just going to scale it up by pressing S on the keyboard and then dragging the mouse like so. And then we're going to go ahead and select the material preview or the rendered preview on the top right here, just to see what our video looks like in our viewport. Now you can see our image or our video is now shown on the plane. And then if I click on the rendered preview here, this is the one that we'll be using for our final video when we start to render it, and you'll see here the shadows are a lot more prominent than they are on the material preview, and that's because it takes into account all the lights that are in the scene. Now you'll notice that this cube here is casting a shadow on to our video, and also our video appears to be a little bit darker as well. Now we can fix this by going to the shading workspace here, and then let's go to the rendered viewport here, and then from here make sure that our plane is selected, and we're just going to tidy this up here a little bit, just dragging these along here, and then we're going to press Shift A, and then we're going to search for the emission shader, and then click to place it there, and then we're just going to hook that up like so, so the color to the color, and then the emission to the surface, and then straight away you'll see that our cube is no longer casting a shadow, and that's because our mesh here, or our video plane, is now emitting light. So that is cool, and we can also increase or decrease the strength of that light on our plane over here on our emission. So first let's go ahead and select the camera that's already in our project and press X on the keyboard and delete it. We're going to select our cube here as well and press X to delete that, as we no longer need it. And then from here we're going to press Shift A on the keyboard and camera to add a new camera to our project. And then we're going to add a new workspace here, just general layout. Make sure that we're in the rendered preview mode, and then we're going to move our cursor to the top right corner of the viewport here until it turns into this cross, and then press and click and drag your mouse to create a new viewport which will act as our camera view. Now to do that, just go ahead and select the camera view icon here. Make sure that it's also set to the correct viewport shading mode, so we want it rendered, and this is what our camera is looking at right now. So if we press G on, make sure the camera is selected, and press G on the keyboard, we can go ahead and move it around, and you can see that is what it is looking at. Now we want to change, in order to change what it's looking at here, and to change its location, we want to go to Object Properties, and let's go ahead and change its rotation to 90 degrees. Make sure Y is set to 0 and Z is set to 90, like so. And now if we go ahead and move that out, you can see that it is looking straight at our image. Now let's go ahead and move its location, so we can move the location Y to 0 so that it's centered, and then we can also move the Z to 0 so that it's centered as well. And there you have it. We've got our camera moving along the X-axis to zoom in and out, like so. Now let's go ahead to the object data properties here. We want to change the focal length of our camera to something like 35, like that. And then if we go back to our object data properties, we can go ahead and adjust that as well. Now to animate our camera, first let's go ahead and make sure that we've set this to 0, and then we want to add a keyframe here. So first of all, let's start our animation zoomed in like that, and then click the keyframe button like so to add a keyframe. Now you can see in our timeline we've got this diamond to indicate we've got a keyframe added there. Let's scrub along our timeline to about 100, and then we want to go ahead and move our camera and zoom it out here along the x-axis until our whole animation is shown, and then click on the keyframe button here like that. And now as you can see, as we scrub back and forth in our timeline, we've got this nice zoom in and zoom out animation. And we can go ahead and test the speed of this by clicking play on our timeline like so. And once your camera is aligned and your AI plate is using an emission shader, you've basically created a digital backdrop. Now we can start layering in all the 3D assets and really bring this environment to life. This stage is all about composition. So what we're going to do now is import the various 3D assets that we downloaded from Envato and arrange them in the scene whilst testing that the asset placements work with the existing camera movement that we created. Now to import our assets, all we need to do is go to File, Import, and then choose either OBJ or FBX usually, depending on what sort of file type we downloaded them from Envato as. So let's go ahead and choose OBJ for now. And then we can go to where we downloaded our assets. I'm just going to go ahead and try one of these here. So let's go ahead and try the car frame. You can see it's also got OBJ, both OBJ and FBX. So let's go ahead and select OBJ and import that in. And then sometimes you may need to scale these assets down. So let's press S on the keyboard and scale it down like so. And hopefully they will be imported along with the corresponding textures. So if we go to our material preview here, you can see that our car has successfully been imported along with the texture. Now sometimes you may need to go into the shading viewport here and manually go to the location of where the image of the texture is. So to do that, simply select this node here, and then you want to select Open Image, and then find out where the texture is located for our particular object, and then open the image here, like so. So simply go ahead and press G to move our car into place. And if we go to our layout here, we can go ahead and rotate this and scale it to how we want our eventual animation to look. So I'm just going to move this over here like so. And then let's go ahead and import the rest of the objects the same way. Now here you can see I've added all of the 3D assets and arranged them into the scene, into a composition like so. So you can see here we've got our tree in the corner. We've also got our car that we've imported at the beginning here, along with some rocks and all sorts of shrubbery as well. So you can find all of these assets in Envato. Just download them and then just go to File, Import, and import them as an OBJ or an FBX like we did before, and then just simply scale them with the S key on the keyboard and then press G on the keyboard to move them into position like that. And then make sure that as you zoom in and out of your animation that it looks nice in a composition. Now that we've got our 3D objects placed, the next step is lighting. Good lighting is what really sells the illusion that your 3D elements belong in the same world as the AI footage. Let's go ahead and move over to our rendered preview mode, and you can see straight away that our 3D assets are appearing very, very dark, and that's because we have no lighting in the scene. So let's go ahead and add some lighting. So to do that, we want to press Shift A on the keyboard, and then we want to select Light and then select Sun. Now make sure that's selected here, and we want to increase the strength of our sun to 10. And you can see how that's affecting our scene here like that. And we also want to change the color of our sun to match our image, so something a little bit warmer like so. And then let's go ahead and go to object properties here, and then we can actually change the rotation of our sunlight so that it matches our image a little bit better. So let's go ahead and we can even move the location of our sun up here on the Y and on the X, and then just change where it is on the Z as well, see if that makes any difference. And then let's go ahead and change its rotation here like so, and just experimenting around with these properties until you get the right lighting, like that. Press Shift A on the keyboard and let's add a new area light here, and then press G on the keyboard again just to move it, press S on the keyboard to scale it up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move around our scene and press R to rotate our area light so that the light is pointing in the direction of where all our harsh shadows are. So you can see here where the car is, it's quite dark, so we just want to brighten that up just a little bit. Make sure that the color here is again a warmer color, and we just want to increase the exposure ever so slightly so that it is affected. So let's go ahead and make sure that it's there and it's lit up like so. See, there you can see straight away. Now if we go back to our scene view, if we switch off the area light with and without, how that looks. So we can go ahead and adjust that as you want. And same with some of the other areas in our scene here as well. So we can go ahead and duplicate our area light by pressing Shift D on the keyboard and then moving it around, rotating it, and then moving it around until it's where we want it to be, like so. You can see how that affects, just a subtle effect for our scene. And one more over on the bottom left here. So let's press Shift D on the keyboard again, and then just go ahead and just very subtly brighten up that area. Now let's go ahead and add some volumetric fog to the scene to tie all of our assets together and make it look a little bit nicer. So to do that, we want to press Shift A on the keyboard and then select Mesh and then Cube, and then we want to press S on the cube to scale it up. And the goal here is to make sure our cube covers our whole scene. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's press S to scale it up and press S and Y to scale it up in the Y axis like so, S and X to scale it up in the X axis, and we want to make sure that it also covers our little camera that's over here as well. You can see how our camera is actually just looking at the cube, so we want to make sure that our camera is also inside the cube. So let's go ahead and do that, and now you can see our camera is now successfully inside the cube. And we also want to make sure that our back plate is also filled. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's just scale up in the Z axis, make sure we've selected the right object, and scale it up in the Y to fill that. And there you go. So we've successfully covered the whole area of our scene with this cube. Next, what we want to do is we want to go over to our shading properties here, and we want to create a new material. And let's go ahead and remove this principled BDSF here, and then let's go ahead and change the make a new node. So press Shift A, and we want to search for volume scatter, and then we want to hook up the volume to the volume here, and then make sure the color is set a little bit warmer to match our scene. And then we want to change the density to something a little bit lower, so something like 0.03, like that. So you can see how that is affecting our scene. 0.02, maybe that's a little bit too much. We can also adjust the anisotropy to make the lighting pass through the fog a little bit better. So let's make this a little bit lighter, or even lighter, 0.005, like so. You can see how the fog sort of ties all of our scene together like that. So if we go ahead and remove it, you can see what that looks like. Let's go ahead and change this cube and rename it to fog like that. So just play about with the values here until you get something that you like. Now that the lighting is in place and the 3D world is built, it's time for the fun final touches. This is where the scene really starts to feel cinematic. Let's start with the flock of birds. It's just a simple stock video overlay from Envato. Now this is just a small detail, but it adds motion and depth without distracting from the main focal point. So just like how we imported our original video to the project, we're going to do exactly the same for our stock footage. So just press Shift A on the keyboard, go to Image, and then select Mesh Plane. Select our flock of birds, import that, and then press S on the keyboard to scale that up so we can see where it is and what it looks like in our scene. Now we're just going to move them a little bit closer to our image plane, so just press G on the keyboard and then X to move it along the X axis, just to make sure that it's closer to our original video. And then from there, let's go ahead and move this to position. So let's go ahead and move this to off screen like that. And then if we want to animate this, let's go ahead and move our timeline to 0. And then over in the object properties panel here, we're going to create a new keyframe for all 3 of our locations. And then let's go ahead and scrub our timeline to 100. And then move our flock of birds, press G on the keyboard and then Y to move it along the Y axis to the other end. And then once you've done that, make sure you've created new keyframes for the location in this part of the timeline. And as we scrub back and forth in the timeline, you should see how our birds are animating and flying across the screen like that. Excellent. Next, I'm bringing in a dusty storm overlay. This is one of my favorite tricks for a post-apocalyptic or desert environment. Press Shift A on the keyboard, go to Image, Mesh Plane, and then let's select our dusty storm overlay here, like so. Press S on the keyboard to scale it up. And for this one, we want to go ahead and sort of fill the screen like that. And we want it to be in between certain objects here. So let's go ahead and press G on the keyboard and X to move it along the X plane here. Let's have one storm just behind all of our objects, like so. So this will be animating behind the objects. And then we want to go ahead and press Shift D on the keyboard and then press X. And let's just move this one in front of all of our objects. And then scale this down like that. Just scale this and move it along just in front of the camera. So that fills the screen as well. Now you can see as we scrub back and forth in our animation, the dust storm in front is just a little bit too powerful for our scene. So let's go ahead and change that. So first of all, let's go ahead and move this a little bit closer to the camera here. So press G and X like so. I'm just going to scale this down again. Now, if we want to make this a little bit less powerful, let's go back to the shading workspace here. And with the dust storm overlay selected, we can go over to the mix shader and then just bring that factor down slightly like that. So you can have some very subtle dust animation at the beginning or near the front of our camera, and then the dust at the back of our camera will continue to animate. So just some very nice subtle dust animation for our video. So as you can see, the dust overlay really helps unify the scene. It softens the edges of the 3D objects, adds depth, and makes the entire environment feel hot, dry, and windy. It blends both the 2D AI video and the 3D layers together almost like a natural piece of atmosphere sitting between them. So our environment is built, the lighting is matched, and all our finishing touches are in place. Now it's time to bring everything together and render the final animation. Now let's go to Render Properties, and let's scroll down here to Color Management, and then we want to change the view to Filmic, and then make this look to either high contrast or very high contrast. And we can also change the exposure and the gamma here as well to suit what we want the image to look. And we can also change the curves here. So let's go ahead and check the curves, and then just move this down slightly, and then move this up as well. Like so. Go to the rendering workspace, and from here we want to go to output properties and make sure that all of these properties here are as you want them. So things like the resolution, make sure that it's the correct resolution that you want your final image or video to be. And then we want to make sure that the frame rate is set to something like 24 FPS, since this is a video. And we want the frame range to start from the very start of our video to the very end frame of our video. In this case, it'll be something after frame 100. So something like 240 as the video continues to go past 240, I believe, is fine. So you can see here how our flags and our dust is still animating past that. So something around the 200 range is fine. So make sure it's at the very end of the video. 240, it's still finishing over there like that. So that's perfect. Let's go back to rendering, and then we want to make sure that our output is where we want it to be, and then we want to make sure that the media type is set to video RGB, and then that the encoding here is set to what we want it to be. So here it's set to Matroska, and the video codec is H.264. And then make sure that the output quality is set to high quality. And then over here we want to go to the Render Properties tab, make sure that we've set the render engine to Eevee, and we want the render samples to be something high. So something between 128 and 256 is usually fine. We want to make sure that shadows is checked, and we want to make sure that ray tracing is checked as well, along with denoising. And then once you've done that, let's go ahead and click on the render button. And here it is, a simple AI video clip from Envato VideoGen transformed into a fully cinematic 3D environment, all inside Blender with a few video assets and some clever layering. So whether you're working on short films, game projects, motion graphics, or just experimenting with new AI-driven workflows, this video gives you a fast and powerful way to build worlds that look and feel production ready. And if you want more tutorials like this, make sure to like and subscribe. We've got way more coming. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Bye.